Welcome back to Manhwa Unlocked. Hit that subscribe button and let's unlock another world. At that moment, Chang-ho and the merchant were discussing possible escape routes. The roof they were on no longer seemed safe since a monster had recently been seen there. While the hunters were discussing their problems, an urgent message arrived. A mysterious hunter with severe injuries had been spotted near the scene. They decided to stay inside the building and wait for the hunters to arrive. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded outside. At first, they thought help had finally arrived, but it turned out to be Jason, who had returned from the Pantheon and already managed to destroy several monsters. He was wounded after battling the Heavenly Guardians and asked the merchant to prepare as much meat as possible to regain his strength. Jason wasn't bothered at all by the decapitated monster's corpse lying nearby. After years in hell, he had grown used to eating in horrific conditions, so even monster blood on the food didn't disgust him. Chang-ho and the merchant nearly vomited at the sight. Soon, hunters arrived at the scene, and one of the soldiers who entered the store confirmed that they were all right. The merchant thanked the soldiers for saving them, but they were shocked to see Jason calmly eating among the corpses. Chang-ho explained that his behavior was due to extreme stress and exhaustion after battle. They were about to quietly leave the building, but the soldiers stopped them, saying they couldn't just walk away. Understanding the situation, Chang-ho took out his ID as the leader of the Seoul clan team and showed it to them. The soldiers were surprised to find a representative of an allied clan among them and offered to escort them to safety. Outside, the rest of the soldiers continued inspecting the area, but one of the hunters could barely hold back his nausea at the horrifying scene. The manager was extremely irritated by his subordinate's behavior, believing this was no time to lose composure. When the hunter went to examine the bodies of the slain monsters, the manager wondered who this man really was. Someone who could so easily wipe out an entire horde of creatures with such cold cruelty. Meanwhile, Jason and Chang-ho had already left the scene and were heading to Chang-ho's home. The night promised to be difficult, and it was safer for Jason to stay at his friend's place. He was being hunted, and at Chang-ho's home, he could rest, sleep, and enjoy a tasty chicken dinner. To keep Jason's relatives from worrying, Chang-ho promised to call them and say everything was fine. Sitting at the table, Jason began asking how to become a hunter. He was interested in the money since he'd heard the job paid well. With his abilities, he could immediately qualify for a B rank and, with enough effort, even reach A. Hunter levels were divided into ranks like steps of mastery. Reaching B meant one could join a major clan or become a member of the Hunter Association. The higher the rank, the higher the pay. Even at B rank, the income was excellent, and A opened even more opportunities. Jason asked if there were hunters stronger than A rank ones. The most powerful were the S rank hunters. There were only 5 of them in the entire world out of more than 2 million awakened individuals. Their strength went far beyond human limits. However, Jason didn't care what rank he would get. The only thing that mattered was making as much money as possible. If he had to become an S rank hunter to do it, he was ready to go all the way. He was nothing if not ambitious. Chang-ho, however, warned him that even reaching B rank was an incredible stroke of luck, since even in Korea, A rank hunters were extremely rare. Meanwhile, in another skyscraper, a man sat at a massive table, having dinner while studying the biography of a mysterious young man. He was discussing a complicated situation with his subordinate, a debtor who had caused chaos. The man angrily jabbed his knife into the dossier, wondering how some unknown person could destroy an entire organization and bring their business to the brink of collapse. The head of the Red Horse clan was curious why the only survivor ran away if he was still alive. The bandit, exhausted and trembling, admitted that he had nowhere else to go. He couldn't turn to the police, so he chose the only option, to tell them everything. However, his nervousness aroused suspicion, and many wondered what exactly had scared him so much. He glanced at his former boss, swallowing a lump of fear. The leader, named Lee So-gu, placed a hand on his shoulder to calm him, though his own irritation was evident. The bandit, barely holding back tears, begged for his life. Lee So-gu promised to take only the money. He was sure that even after the destruction, the clan must have had some hidden funds left. But the bandit insisted he held a low position and knew nothing about any secret stashes. The man begged him to believe it, and after a short pause, the clan leader decided to let him go. The frightened bandit exhaled words of gratitude, But his relief didn't last long. At that moment, one of Lee Sogu's men silently approached and drove a blade straight into the man's head, shattering his skull to pieces. Blood splattered everywhere, staining even the clan leader's clothes. As he left, Lee Sogu ordered his men to deal with the unknown person mentioned in the documents. The woman standing in the shadows accepted the order and promised to carry it out without any trouble. The next day, Jason went to the Korean Hunter Association building. To enter, he had to tell the staff at the entrance that he came to receive his awakening certificate, after which he would be directed further. Chung-ho advised him to behave as politely as possible, since Jason sometimes made a strange impression with his bluntness. Chung-ho went to work and asked Jason to text him once the results were known. At the entrance to the association, a large line had already formed. Many people, like Jason, had come for their certificates. For him, who had spent 80 years in hell, the whole process seemed a bit confusing. While waiting near the examination office, he realized how in demand the hunter profession was. All he could do was hope his number would be called soon. At that moment, the sound of an incoming message came from his phone pocket. His mother wanted to know where he was and when he would return home. The woman had taken a day off after hard work. Her back was bothering her. Jason didn't want to reveal where he really was. Otherwise, she would have worried even more and most likely forbidden him from joining the Hunter Association. So he lied, saying he was still at Chang-ho's place, about to take a shower and then return home. In their chat, his mother mentioned that Jisoo wanted to have lunch with him and had gone to the store for soup. Jason realized he needed to hurry. Absorbed in the conversation, he didn't notice that his turn had come. The association employee invited him in. Inside the room where awakenings were tested, a man was shouting, insisting that he was awakened, even though the device hadn't detected any signs of power. His noise irritated everyone so much that people in line began asking him to leave. However, the man wouldn't calm down, claiming that since he'd suddenly gone bald overnight, that surely meant he was awakened. People could barely hold back their laughter. Refusing to believe the results, the man demanded to speak to the association's management. Then Jason stepped in and coldly hinted that many people were still waiting for their turn. Under the pressure of his aura, the man instantly fell silent, covered in sweat. He began making excuses, blaming faulty equipment. However, another visitor who had already passed the test and confirmed his awakening offered to check the device. As soon as his palm touched the sphere, it glowed green. The man had sea-level power, meaning the device worked perfectly. The association employee asked the balding man to leave the room and invited the next candidate. It was Jason's turn. As he approached the device, the girl conducting the test quietly whispered to her colleague that she expected him to have a very high level. At that moment, the branch manager's phone rang. He was told to urgently go down to the 6th floor, room 3, but no reason was given, only that he needed to see it for himself. While riding the elevator, he suspected that perhaps a new S-rank hunter had appeared. Exiting the elevator, he ran into a crowd of people gathered near the examination chamber. Pushing through them with difficulty, the manager made his way inside. His eyes froze on the device. It was completely destroyed. He demanded an explanation from the staff. It turned out that as soon as Jason placed his hand on the sphere, it began flashing with multiple colors. The staff tried to calm him down, saying that sometimes this happened, but a few seconds later, the sphere started to crack. Soon, an explosion erupted, and thick smoke filled the entire room. No one understood what had happened or how it was even possible. The device had never failed before. The manager quickly realized that further testing on this machine was impossible, otherwise they'd be left without any equipment. However, the question arose, how to determine Jason's level? The association had never encountered anything like this before. It was decided to send him for a special licensing test conducted by the border guards. This test was extremely accurate and accounted for all criteria, so Jason had no reason to worry about the result. With no other choice, he agreed to take the test. However, the test was scheduled for another day, and Jason had to go home without knowing his rank. The association staff began discussing what had happened. The woman who conducted the test suggested that the device exploded because of Jason's excessively high energy level, which the sphere simply couldn't withstand. This could mean that Jason's power exceeded ordinary limits, possibly even surpassing S-rank. On his way home, he called Chang-ho and told him what had happened. Chang-ho confirmed that the test results had already been forwarded to the border guards. Chang-ho was confident Jason would achieve a high result on the test. After all, no one had ever broken the device before. That alone proved how extraordinary his abilities were. He told Jason to head home and promised to send information later about the time and place of the examination. After they said goodbye, Jason felt something strange. From the unfinished building behind him came the eerie sensation of being watched, as if someone was observing his every move. He suddenly stopped and turned around to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Peering at the upper floors of the building, Jason noticed a faint glow on the second-to-top level. There was a girl there, a mercenary from Lee So-gu's clan. She lay in wait with a rifle, ready to shoot Jason. But she was betrayed by a faint glint from her scope, which she hadn't accounted for. She was a blonde with a cold gaze. She had already evaluated her target and decided Jason wasn't particularly dangerous. Even if he turned out to be stronger, one bullet should be enough to settle everything. Her finger was already on the trigger, but suddenly she realized that Jason was looking directly at her, as if he knew exactly where she was hiding. She was stunned. Until this moment, no one had ever been able to detect her, especially from such a distance. Looking closer through her scope, she realized the guy wasn't as simple as he seemed. Jason hadn't just noticed her. It was as if he was reading her thoughts. With his eyes, he showed her exactly where to shoot, as though mocking her and demonstrating his superiority. Jason hadn't just noticed her. It was as if he was reading her thoughts. With his eyes, he showed her exactly where to shoot, as though mocking her and demonstrating his superiority. Her instincts screamed only one thing: shoot and escape as quickly as possible. Her rifle and body became enveloped in a blue aura, meaning this would not be an ordinary shot. The bullet burst from the barrel at incredible speed, the air trembled, and a shockwave rippled through the alley. There was an explosion and a cloud of dust covered the street. Such an attack would have instantly destroyed an ordinary person. The girl exhaled with relief, convinced that Jason was dead. But when the smoke cleared, she froze in horror. Jason was standing in the same place without a single scratch. A deep trench had formed around him from the impact. The girl hadn't used an ordinary bullet, but an aura-enhanced charge, much more dangerous than a standard one. But for Jason, it was nothing. The Lord of Hell had fought monsters whose blows were dozens of times stronger. Fear gripped her mind, and the only decision she made was to run. However, before she could take a step, Jason's guided blade, obtained after killing monsters in the Pantheon, flew into the building. The blade pierced her leg, depriving her of movement. She fell onto the cold concrete, unable to escape. Using the power of shadows, Jason soared to the top floor in seconds and appeared before the girl. She had no chance of survival. His presence was oppressive, making her lose her composure. Even realizing that her shot meant nothing destroyed her confidence. The girl trembled but tried to reach for her gun, understanding that there was no other way out. For in her entire career, she had never seen anything like this. It was beyond her comprehension. He displayed simply inhuman abilities and powers incomprehensible even to hunters of her level. In rage, she began shooting in Jason's direction. She emptied the magazine, hoping to at least hurt him a little, but the bullets only tore the concrete around him. The bullets in the gun eventually ran out. When smoke obscured her vision, she didn't know if she had managed to kill him. But suddenly, footsteps sounded behind her, and the girl froze, feeling his presence at her back. Jason grabbed her by the throat and slammed her into the wall with full force. The next moment, a monster burst from his shadow. A faceless creature with dark tendrils instead of arms and eyes glowing in the void. It silently grabbed the girl and pinned her to the wall, immobilizing her. Jason noticed that she had lost consciousness even before the monster could release its venom. It even slightly disappointed him. Killing such a weak target seemed pointless. Jason's attention was drawn to a guitar case lying nearby. Inside, he found the girl's rifle, a stock of bullets, a folded sheet of paper, and 3 photographs. The photos showed his family and himself. When the girl regained consciousness, Jason began interrogating her, demanding to explain where she got this information and who sent her. He made it clear that unnecessary words could cost her life. The mercenary understood she could not reveal the secrets of the Red Horse clan. She feverishly searched for a way out and, recalling the brute who had recently come to her master, decided to use his name, hoping to confuse the situation. She named the man Kim Sonet, And, as expected, Jason did not understand who she was talking about. The girl said that this man had recently gotten into trouble and hinted that he might be the key figure. Jason guessed that it was the man from whom he had recently taken all the money and realized who it was. The mercenary continued to weave her story, hoping to convince him to let her go, but Jason did not believe her words. He forcefully threw the bullet he held in his hand, and it pierced her shoulder. The girl screamed so loudly that her voice echoed through the entire building. She didn't understand why he did it, as she had told him everything she knew. But Jason was sure that mercenaries never reveal the truth voluntarily. That could mean only one thing. She was lying. He gave her one last chance. If she tried to lie again, she would die. The girl was silent, not knowing how to answer his repeated question. She had already failed the mission, and even if she escaped alive, death would find her anyway. The Red Horse clan does not forgive mistakes. Realizing the hopelessness, she decided to act boldly. Clenching her hand over her heart, she prepared to die with pride, taking the man with her. But Jason, without hesitation, tore off her arm, and half her body fell onto the cold floor. He was disappointed. He still hadn't found out who sent her. Now he also had to get rid of the body. Unwilling to use excessive force, he used the skill diary reading, focusing on the memories of the deceased. The search keyword, soul imprisonment. Soon, the necessary information was found, and he headed to the Pantheon. The construction site was empty, the body covered with blue fabric with only a hand visible. The system greeted Jason and asked for the visit date, to which he replied, "The 134th page, soul imprisonment, the artifact. The main royal weapon, one of the 15 powers of hell, binding its owner to the dead through blood." Initially, he intended to use soul imprisonment for battles, but found no worthy opponent. On Earth, however, the situation was different. The artifact would be used for its intended purpose. Jason was transported to the 134th page, to a place called the River of Ghosts. On the opposite shore lay the king's territory. There once had been a boat here, but now nothing remained. No trees, no safe path. Touching the water meant death. The system set the task to destroy the celestial beings that had captured the river, with a time limit of 30 minutes. Soon Jason noticed flying creatures, seeing for the first time the mechanical constructs of the heavenly beings. Spider-like mechanisms fell to the ground, attacking. Jason dodges a purple projectile that shatters a stone block. He hopes to get a boat after victory and draws his enchanted dagger. The battle begins. He slices the spider in half. He faces a horde of poisonous creatures, from which a barrier protects him. But the Lord of Hell is too lazy to deal with them one by one. So he decides to finish them all at once. With one swift movement, he kills all the monsters and destroys the purple sphere. After that, the system informs him that he has completed the mission. Because of this, his level increased, and the level of realization has already reached 50% of soul imprisonment. Now he can claim his reward for the battle with the insects. A glowing orb appears before him. It turns out to be this blessing of poisonous insects, armor made from the materials of the White Lord. It protects the entire body, reduces injuries, and carries immunity from the fallen. Seeing a bright light on the opposite shore, Jason realized that he would have to cross the river manually after all. When he managed to do this, Jason had already put on the armor. It fit him perfectly, golden armor resembling the shell of insects. At that moment, a desperate new message arrived from the inhabitants of the Pantheon. They reported the disappearance of a fortress and were clearly upset about it. The black-haired man steps onto the lifeless ground, and suddenly a gigantic structure bursts out from beneath it. A celestial obelisk. The system explains, "This is a creation of the celestial beings, made of stone. It serves as a concentration camp for the captured souls of the dead." Examining the structure, the Lord of Hell realizes, this is where his next trial will begin. So it is. Before him appears a screen with a warning, a high-difficulty mission. The goal, to destroy the celestial beings. The time limit, 2 hours. The reward, expansion runes and 100% soul realization. At that moment, a warrior in heavy armor appears, the commander of diseases. Once he might have been a serious opponent, but now, compared to the Lord of Hell at his peak, he is nothing. The black-haired man only mocks them, releases a fraction of his energy, and the warriors immediately falter. But even fear does not stop their advance. And then Jason easily cuts off their heads one by one. It seems the monsters are missing their essence. And the guy guesses the reason lies in the obelisk. Deciding to test his power, he uses the ability Bloody Naturalization. This skill devours his health but strengthens attacks and abilities by 300%. With rage, he storms into the enemy army. Crowds of creatures fall under his assault. With a crushing blow, he sweeps away an entire horde, destroying 130 opponents at once. The system confirms the result, but this is only the beginning. Without hesitation, Jason decides to attack from the inside. He rushes to the entrance of the building and clears it completely in a matter of seconds. Explosions echo inside, and all the monsters in the area disappear. The bloodthirsty hero walks outside, mission accomplished. Soul realization has reached 100%, and the reward is 2 expansion runes. 2 glowing spheres appear before him. Before using them, he studies the information. The artifact is called Soul Imprisonment. It is an ancient treasure of the king. The soul of the dead mixes with the owner's blood and falls under his control. The artifact has 3 features: the ability to view memories, resurrect a soul as a warrior of disease, and store them within, but its capacity is small, only 20 souls. Still, as a reward, it could be useful. The guy activates the artifact and begins collecting souls. Immediately, the system offers to engrave the expansion runes. He agrees, and the capacity increases. Now, hundreds of souls can be imprisoned. Having obtained what he wanted, Jason decides to leave the Pantheon. But suddenly, a strange sphere appears. The system reports, the inhabitant of Hell is rejected by the light energy. Now the Pantheon will treat him with greater caution. The guy realizes the residents are once again trying to appease him with words. But they shouldn't count on his generosity. He simply takes the new treasure. His hand fills with radiant energy. After that, the message repeats, useless, empty. The black-haired man leaves the Pantheon and returns to the construction site. But one thing bothers him. Where did the corpse he hid go? Soon he finds himself at home. His sister meets him with reproach. The soup has already gone cold, and she calls her brother to the table. The news on TV reports that the opening of the portals has caused enormous damage. The mother turns off the screen and invites everyone to sit down for dinner. The atmosphere at the table is tense. Jason notes to himself how the world has changed. Now monsters can even be seen on the news. The mother apologizes for hiding it before, afraid to cause her son another shock. But the guy thanks her for saving his life in this world. He tries to lighten the mood and asks if the family needs anything. But Gilly just laughs, saying, could he even afford to buy anything? After dinner, the black-haired man calls his friend. He plans to lay low for a while. Cheonhan is surprised. Is it because the testing will take place somewhere else? But Jason explains. He is worried about the missing corpse. He asks his old comrade to watch over the family. Now he intends to make the enemies come out on their own. Meanwhile, one of the Red Horse's servants has already taken care of the body. Judging by what happened to the Class B mercenary, it becomes clear the guy is not that simple. The servant awaits orders, but the clan leader commands to leave him alone. There will be a test ahead. That's when the opportunity will come. Inside the capsule lies a young man named Jinchul. He eagerly awaits this day. The professor reports. The indicators are stable, the serum can be injected. The fox-eyed man warns the subject. The pain will be unbearable, but he is ready. The experiment begins. At first, everything goes smoothly, but at the 55% mark, it becomes clear. The limit is exceeded. The scientists fear for his life, but the man with the scar assures them, this guy will endure. At 90%, the body is already twisting, but the injection continues. At 100, the heart stops. The test subject seems dead. But at that very moment, the first signs of life awaken in the water chamber. The indicators flare up on the monitor, and the guy shatters the glass. After that, the guy climbs out. Meanwhile, the black-haired receives a message. During the upcoming test, he will only be allowed to use the weapons and shield issued by the association. But that doesn't scare him. His physical strength is more than enough. To test his theory, he takes a cane and hits himself. The shield, as he thought, is invisible in the real world, meaning it's always available, and weapons can be changed. He decides to turn the blade into a branch. The system clarifies. Modify the judge's dagger? A simple stick appears in his hands. The guy realizes, if this is possible, he can bring back his beloved sword. that becomes his goal. The territory of the Salt King. Jason did not expect to end up here again. Around him, a pack of strange wolves. The black-haired draws the judge's blade and decides to use it in an unusual way. The blade pierces his hand, and blood activates the soul imprisonment. Before him appears an enraged armored wolf. But Jason is ready for it. The battle ignites instantly, a strike, and the beast's belly is pierced through. The creature dissolves. The judge's blade already seeks a new target. Soon, 33 warriors from Arkalay's army are destroyed. The blade returns to his hand, and the guy summons an army. Fanged creatures surround him, but suddenly, one of the wolves is grabbed by a dark hand that seems to grow from the shadow. From underground, copies of the enemies begin to emerge. Shadow wolves. This sight terrifies the red-eyed beasts, but the copies keep multiplying. On Jason's command, his wolves charge into battle against their miserable doubles. He pulls out a lighter and lights a cigarette. Taking a drag, he coughs and wonders why his friend Cheonho poisons himself with this filth at all. The battle continues. The red-eyed wolf slashes a shadow with its paw. Another beast tramples a copy in armor. But Jason warns, they must not be underestimated. The summoned wolves are immortal until the mark is removed from their bodies. One white-furred dog jerks back, feeling breath on its neck. These creatures know neither fear nor death. Such warriors are the strongest on the battlefield. Despite the victory, Jason gathers only 12 souls out of 1,000. Too few. Which means another mission will follow. Realizing this, he soars into the sky like a rocket. He's too lazy to waste time, but wiping out a handful of beasts in 2 hours is no problem for him. He picks a target point and crashes down like a blazing meteor. The poor creatures don't even realize what awaits them. During the fierce battle, one of Arkalay's warriors instinctively senses deadly danger. But it's already too late. For a second, a bright flash lit up the battlefield. And right after that, a powerful explosion rang out. At the same time, a snow-white blade pierced the body of a purple creature. The test subject, a D-rank monster, vanished without a trace at that very moment. In front of the mysterious girl with blue eyes appeared a notification stating that every test subject had been eliminated. Her name was Shin Choyon, and she belonged to the Soul Clan. A light scratch on her face disappeared, and the hunting simulation came to an end. The supervisor in glasses who was observing this turned to his superior, the head of the Shu clan, Hwang Jinyon. The man noted that the girl showed good results but had one weakness. She lost focus on the battlefield. The supervisor in glasses assured him that they still had 10 days left, and during that time her skills could be honed. The black-haired superior ordered to double the difficulty of training to stay ahead of the real psychopath. The brown-haired supervisor clarified if he meant Xian from the Red Horse clan, and received an affirmative answer. Everyone understood that if it weren't for that man, no one could surpass Shin Choyon. Although the girl had a B rank and Jinchol had an A, Hwang Jinyon noted that this wasn't the main point. What mattered more was what dirty methods the Red Horse clan would use. The assistant holding a tablet expressed doubt. Would they really dare to do something like that after the rookie recruitment had been banned for an entire year? But that was exactly what worried the superior. After a year of inactivity, the clan was surely hungry for revenge. Now everyone realized that this test would become an arena for two rivals, Shin Choyon and Cheon Jinchol. At that time, Jason sat atop a mountain of corpses of lower creatures. A notification appeared before him stating that the inhabitants were amazed by his skills and showed reverence and fear, and one of the demons even gave him a standing ovation. The goal was almost achieved. He had gathered 999 soul stones out of 1,000. But flattering praises didn't please him. He preferred something more tangible. Calmly finishing his cigarette among the bodies of his fallen enemies, Jason noticed that one of the dogs kept growling. Then he drew his blade and finished what he had started. His peace was not to be disturbed. The system hurried to congratulate him on completing the task. The realization level had risen, and the promised reward was granted. From the bodies of the enemies, bluish soul orbs slowly floated toward their master. This was yet another of Jason's abilities, soul collection for the altar. But no altar was visible nearby. Stretching out his hand, he realized there was no need to search. Stone pillars rose from the ground, and the altar revealed itself before him. The cigarette fell from his mouth as the system offered a new mission, the realization of an item called the Sword of Karma. The difficulty level was marked as the highest. and to complete it, he had to gather souls at the altar and prove his strength to the guardian. Jason placed the collected souls into the vessel, and soon something gigantic appeared before him. It was a serpent with burning eyes, the guardian of the heavenly realm, Arkiel. To obtain the treasure, he had to pass its trial. Jason already held the blade in his hands, displeased that instead of a fight, he was facing some kind of question. When the serpent let out a ridiculous hiss, the man took it as mockery and furiously hurled his blade into the fiery eye of the beast. The serpent screamed, but its cries were nothing compared to the rage of the Lord of Hell. Jason activated the blood naturalization ability, which tripled his strength and deprived the monster of its second eye. After that, he lunged at the guardian and plunged the blade into its head. The serpent howled and its head exploded, splattering everything around with streams of blood. However, its body began to regenerate. The guardian proved to be resilient. The monster's poisonous breath rushed toward the hero, but Jason held back the assault with his hand and noticed a white flame burning in its jaws. The flame of rebirth. He managed to seal it inside, and at that moment, the sword of karma, still bound by chains, burst free. Upon obtaining the weapon, Jason realized that the level of realization was only halfway complete. But even that was enough. Raising the blade to the sky, he struck, cleaving the monster in half. The system congratulated him on completing the task, and the sword of karma was fully realized. The chains fell from the blade, revealing its true power. However, the system immediately assigned a new trial: to endure the flame of karma for 10 days. The fire engulfed his body, melting his skin, and though it was pure agony, he endured it. When Jason demanded the timer be removed, the system obeyed, and the trial was counted as complete. The sword recognized him as its master and revealed what had happened in hell after the Lord's disappearance. From its words, it became clear. Unknown beings had invaded hell, stripping the demons of their power and imprisoning them in pandemonium. The blade itself had been swallowed by the serpent, and only the return of its master had freed it. Jason promised that he had come for help and would explain everything later. Before him appeared a strange sphere radiating an energy similar to that of the invaders of hell. Despite the sword's warnings, Jason trusted the system and touched it. However, the sword of karma reminded him that there were still several things he needed to obtain first. Therefore, instead of returning to reality, Jason firmly decided to head once again into Pantheon. Meanwhile, the video of the Goblin Massacre spread all over the network. It was expected. The scene looked so incredible that people couldn't stop discussing it. The entire office where Chanho worked buzzed with conversations, and soon the supervisor in glasses approached him. He suggested they talk in private. They went up to the rooftop, where the man cautiously reminded him that Chanho had been at the scene of the incident and asked if he could share anything useful. Chanho hesitated. If he admitted being friends with the one who had annihilated the goblins, they would do anything to force Jason into their clan. So he preferred to reply evasively that he knew nothing. The supervisor only sighed, remarking that it was a pity. They would have gladly recruited such a hunter. Chanho was secretly glad he had kept the secret, and remembered that only 7 days remained before the testing. To change the subject, he asked how Xinchuan was doing. The man answered after a brief pause, saying that she was fine, but he was worried whether the girl could bear such a heavy burden. Meanwhile, Xinchuan herself was training in a forest thicket, preparing for the exam. She had 10 minutes left until the end of the simulation and needed to destroy 10 stone slabs. Accelerating, she split one in half and another immediately rose from the ground. Suddenly, a D-rank simulation monster appeared behind her. It lunged at the girl and managed to sink its teeth into her shoulder. Xinchuan had to fight 2 beasts at once. But suddenly, a voice announced the end of the training. The monsters vanished, and the forest dissolved. Watching her from the window was the head of the clan, Huang Junyan. He invited the girl to see him and said they needed to talk. In the infirmary, she insisted she could continue, but the man remarked that she was overexerting herself. The girl stubbornly repeated his own words, that one must keep moving toward the goal, even if collapsing from exhaustion. However, he clarified that he meant training the body, not complete self-depletion. The system displayed her stats, revealing that the greatest threat to her wasn't fatigue, but a suppressed mental state. Then Xinchuan firmly declared that she wanted to make it to the top and raise her rank. If she could reach rank A, many new opportunities would open up. But her true goal was different. She dreamed of destroying every monster that lived on Earth. 5 days before the exam, the doors of the isolation chamber opened and Li Sogu entered. He complained about poor ventilation and old equipment, then turned to his protege, Jinchol. The young man was calmly eating and looked pleased. Lisogu noted that if he ate more, the effects of the serum wouldn't cause discomfort, which meant he had a chance to become the main star of the upcoming test. 3 days later, Jason completed another mission and felt ready for the upcoming exam. The sword asked him if they were finally returning to the human world. Wrapped in a cloak, he confirmed that the time had come. The day of testing arrived. This year, the number of awakened individuals had increased by a quarter, and the competition promised to be fierce. Reporters surrounded the building, eagerly awaiting the appearance of the candidates. Lisogu arrived in a white car along with his protege, Jinchol. Journalists immediately swarmed them with questions. Lisogu merely replied calmly that he regretted the events of 2 years ago and promised that this year their clan would act honestly. Inside the building, Jinchol irritably complained about a persistent reporter, but Lisogu scolded him. At that moment, the head of the Seoul clan, Hwang Junyan, approached them. Their exchange of words was tense. Junyan hinted that he feared a repeat of past events. When an injected participant had been brought to the exam, Lisogu only smiled, then continued on his way with Jinchol. At that time, Jason calmly walked down the corridor, causing unease in Junyan, who sensed something strange. His disciple, Shin Chuan, tried to speak to her mentor, but he was too absorbed in his troubled thoughts. Jason received a call from Chanho, apologizing for not being able to attend the exam in person. He replied that it was nothing to worry about. Soon, an announcement echoed through the loudspeakers stating that the trial would begin in 30 minutes. Jason approached a dispenser. It had detailed instructions: place your fingerprint and retrieve a box from the lower compartment, then change into the provided outfit. Examining the equipment, he felt disappointed. He had expected something worthy, but received nothing more than a piece of cloth. Dozens of newcomers gathered in front of Hall number 3. One of them, an elderly man, couldn't believe he had made it among the participants. 600 calls and as many letters had finally paid off. He was filled with anger, remembering the arrogant brat who once touched his head. If he met him now, he wouldn't let it slide. But suddenly, a strong hand gripped his skull. The old man turned around and saw Jinchol blazing with rage, ordering him to get lost. Realizing it was best not to argue, the man decided to step aside. Meanwhile, Jason was walking down the corridor, reluctantly pulling on the issued rags. He noticed a familiar old man and realized with anticipation that the real trial was only beginning. Soon, everyone gathered in the hall: Shin-chan, the red-haired Jinchol, and Jason himself. The participants lined up in rows. Lamps lit up, flooding the arena with bright light. Many saw such technology for the first time. The inspector greeted the newcomers and immediately got to the point. He explained that this time, 3 level portals would be used. Each level would have its own conditions and tasks. Many had never heard such terms before, and confusion spread. One of the young men asked when they would receive their weapons, but the inspector said that no weapons were provided for this trial, and bringing anything other than the issued equipment was strictly forbidden. This caused discontent. How were they supposed to fight without weapons? But soon, an artificial intelligence intervened, explaining that the theme of the trial was adaptation. A hunter's worth is determined not by equipment, but by inner aura and skill. Now each participant had to show how well they could adapt. After a brief introduction, the portal was activated. The examiner ordered the participants to enter starting from the back rows. The first level turned out to be a tropical forest. Immediately upon entry, the examinees felt the cruelty of the place. The suffocating heat drained their strength, and breathing became difficult. Some were already beginning to think they wouldn't survive until the end of the trial. In the observation room, the experts discussed what was happening. The observers' attention switched to the participants, especially Shinshin, whose soul shone too brightly. She remained calm, clearing her mind, and her mentor, Hwang Junyoung, was pleased. Then their gaze shifted to Jinchol, whose power was also impressive. The Red Horse clan clearly prepared him as their main candidate. Lisogu did not hide his smugness, suspecting that Hwang was envious. But suddenly, noise rose in the observation room. Participant number 104 was too calm. Lisogu recognized him. It was Jason. Not a drop of sweat, not a hint of aura. Many wondered whether he was completely concealing it. If so, a technique of that level was unattainable for an ordinary novice. In fact, Jason felt a surge of strength thanks to the blood of the Sea Serpent Guardian. The elixir's effect was to last another 46 hours, granting him unprecedented freedom. However, he hoped no one would uncover his secret, or he risked disqualification. The heat became unbearable and pink bracelets flared on the participants' wrists. The artificial intelligence announced the first mission: to eliminate 20 orcs living in the swamps. Jason rushed forward, leaving the slower competitors behind. The others hurried after him, but one of the participants stumbled and fell, exhausted by the stifling air. His consciousness blurred and hatred for these jungles grew. Suddenly, a spring appeared before his eyes. Real water, promising salvation. As soon as the guy touched the life-giving moisture, it suddenly grabbed him and pulled him down. It turned out to be a sticky worm monster that lived in the swampy area, luring travelers with a substance imitating water. Thus, participant number 94 was eliminated from the trial, and emergency aid was immediately called for him. Soon, the creature was torn apart, and a protective sphere covered the fallen participant, preserving him until rescuers arrived. Meanwhile, Jason continued on his way. He quickly realized that there were no enemies nearby and changed direction. Aid was already rushing to participant number 94 when one of the rescuer's sensors received an urgent message. Supervision was required for participant number 104, named Jason. Meanwhile, behind an orc with an axe, a dark figure appeared, and the monster instinctively sensed danger. The black-haired youth was already considering how best to kill his enemy, perhaps stun him with a stone. But the orc gave no time for thought and roared as he attacked. Jason, anticipating this, discreetly tossed up a boulder and took a combat stance. The huge rock crashed right in front of the monster's face, and at that moment came a crushing blow that tore the orc apart. The stone fragments finished him off completely, and the forest around trembled from the force of the attack. A nearby inspector was observing what was happening. At first, he thought the management was crazy for ordering him to watch some examinee. But now he clearly saw that this boy could not be compared even to the strongest clan rookies. Jason himself realized that killing orcs one by one was too inefficient. Although he hadn't wanted to use magic in the first half of the trial, there was no other choice. He then summoned a shadow and ordered his dark servants to find targets. A rustle was heard in the forest, and the orcs assumed a mouse was hiding nearby. A nice little dessert. The elder orc ordered them to wait, but suddenly the ground shook and rocks fell from above. A huge hole formed in their lair, and before them appeared a stranger holding a stick. In fact, it was Jason, who had managed to discover the monsters hiding underground. They were surprised to realize that food had come to them on its own. While the Lord was counting his enemies, the creatures called him a mouse. The boy didn't understand why, but his weapon, which had taken the form of a branch, explained that the lower beings had mistaken their own king for bait. Smirking, Jason ordered them to be burned to ashes. Meanwhile, Shin-chan was moving rapidly through the forest. She released her aura and expanded her search radius, covering most of the area. Even so, she managed to detect only one orc. The girl instantly changed direction and struck the tree with a powerful kick, knocking the monster down. The blue-eyed warrior understood that at such a pace, completing the test would take an entire hour. The orc jumped up and ran away, but the girl had no intention of letting her prey escape. She swung her arm, preparing to use the fourth technique, when the monster's head was suddenly cut off by someone else. Shin-chan didn't have time to react. Before her stood the insane Jinchol, savoring the taste of blood. He was a newcomer from the Red Horse clan. The red-haired boy smoothed his hair and noted that this was already his fifth defeated monster. But the girl coldly remarked that the Red Horse clan always tries to claim what belongs to others. The boy smirked and reminded her that this was a competition where there's no such thing as mine or yours. The tension between them grew, and Jinchol was already thinking of killing her but stopped in time. He understood it was too early to act. He should wait at least until the second level. Seeing the sour expression on the young man's face, Shin-chan sighed heavily and walked away. But suddenly, she turned back and wished her opponent a good time being alone. Those words drove Jinchol into a rage. He couldn't wait for the next level and was already ready to kill the girl right then and there. However, a powerful explosion echoed through the forest, interrupting his intentions. The light-haired boy stopped, as did Shin-chan, for now both had to understand what had just happened. The forest was ablaze. A few minutes earlier, Jason had been holding a branch that concealed a disguised sword. It waited for its master's command, and without a moment's hesitation, received it. Burn all enemies. Instantly, the weapon's karmic properties activated, specifically the first skill, called Rage. The orcs were confused, shouting the word mouse as they tried to grasp what was happening, but it did not save them from death. The observation hall was in shock. The examinee numbered 104 had successfully completed the first level task and moved on to the next. Such a result was thought impossible. The mission had only just begun, yet the nameless participant had already finished it. Now, everyone watching eagerly awaited more information about the young man and planned to sign a contract with him at all costs. Hwang Junyoung had expected that this boy would cause a stir, but not to this extent. Lisogu, on the other hand, remained cold and turned away from the screen. The staff members who had previously doubted the participants' uniqueness turned pale. One of the women lashed out at a colleague who had dared to question her words, but the man simply admitted his mistake and asked her to stop. At that moment, everyone's attention was drawn to a black-haired staff member. Something unexpected had appeared on the screen. A familiar bald old man ran onto the battlefield. He picked up an axe dropped by the monsters and eagerly finished off the 11 remaining orcs. Now this elderly man had gotten a taste for battle and didn't regret for a second following participant number 104. The observers were stunned. That cowardly old man had always seemed to cheat, but that was precisely the essence of the test since its theme was adaptation, and the old man demonstrated it perfectly. The light-haired boy couldn't understand how an ordinary person, not even one who had passed the awakening test, could end up among the participants. The girl in glasses pointed out that on that day, Jason had broken many measuring orbs. She explained that this had caused rumors about invalid results to spread, and that someone had even filed a complaint. That was probably why the old man had been allowed into the trial. But her colleague in a red tie stopped her and advised her to be more careful with such words. The conversation was interrupted by the chief himself, who in a rough voice admitted that he had done his work superficially. The others immediately bowed and asked what had brought him to the hall. The man calmly stated that he himself had added the old man to the list of participants. They didn't understand why he had done it, but the chief explained. 3 nights ago, that elderly man had wrapped himself in bombs and tried to break through the portal. Hearing the chief's story, the girl in the observation hall was surprised and suggested that perhaps the old man had taken such a desperate action because he failed to become an awakened. But the boss explained that the reasons were different. Several years ago, that man had lost his entire family during a portal opening, and now he was trying to take revenge in this way. After those words, the group of observers fell into heavy silence. The silence was broken by the black-haired employee, who dared to say that such indulgence for the sake of tragic stories could collapse the entire evaluation system. His words sounded audacious, and his colleagues instinctively stepped away from him, expecting inevitable punishment. But the chief merely nodded, acknowledging that the young man was right. Such things could not be allowed. However, the situation with the old man made him see Jason in a new light. For 3 months straight, he had been receiving complaints from that pensioner and had long stopped taking them seriously, until suddenly he discovered a true gem before his eyes. At that moment, technical malfunctions began in the observation room. The image on the screen started to glitch badly. In another wing of this building, Lisogu was meeting with one of his subordinates. He noted that complete chaos reigned in the observation hall. The short-haired man suggested that at this rate, participant number 104 might be able to skip both the 2nd and 3rd levels entirely. But the scarred leader objected. That boy was merely giving their Jinchol a head start, as if deliberately testing his endurance. Nevertheless, doubts remained. His pocket sensor already displayed data about the injected ampule that would alter the monsters on the 2nd level. One of the emergency response team members began executing the order. He felt sorry for the talented newcomer, but he could not interfere with the Red Horse clan. The ampule struck a monster, and the forest immediately fell into unrest. Jason realized that this was the entrance to the 2nd level. Lisogu eagerly awaited the moment when the overconfident boy would die by accident. The flying golem struck by the ampule with unknown contents evolved into a hovering golem, capable of emerging from the mist. The creature went berserk and began spewing flames. The mercenary who had completed the mission pulled out his communicator, but it exploded right in his hands. The smoke contained a paralyzing poison. The man dropped his weapon and coughed, revealing his position. At that time, Jason was moving through the mist, holding a stick in his hands. His device barely helped him navigate. He stumbled upon a strange corpse and immediately sensed danger behind him. Pine cones flew at him, but the flaming sword of karma easily sliced through them. However, the projectiles were special. A powerful explosion followed soon after. Jason endured the flames, though he hadn't expected such a move. At first, he thought the enemy possessed the ability to absorb fire, but later realized he was mistaken. He wanted to use the skill he had previously used to destroy the orcs, but it was still on cooldown. The red-eyed monster had no intention of waiting and again showered him with pine cones. Jason fought back, deflecting them and rushing into attack. The pine cones changed trajectory but couldn't reach him. The hero reached the creature, but it threw him aside, smashing him into trees one after another. Meanwhile, Jinchol finished off the last orc and successfully completed the 1st level mission. But he was furious that he had wasted so much time because of someone else's interference. Suddenly, he sensed the presence of a stranger behind him and caught a thrown object in midair. Inside the white box were an ampule, a special compass, and a note. After reading it, he burned the scrap of paper with his aura and learned that participant number 104 was still on the 1st level. Meanwhile, the golem continued bombarding Jason. Having been thrown several kilometers away, the young man rose again and used the ability Shadow Phantom. He fed the summoned shadow and ordered it to calculate the path. Small monsters caught the flying pine cones, but they weren't enough. Then Jason decided he would repay his enemy with interest. The summoned shadow absorbed the fiery fragments and vanished. Soon, fiery pine cones burst out of the monster's own shadow, a special gift from the Lord of Hell. In the observation hall, the image gradually recovered, and they were once again able to monitor participant number 104. However, the thick fog obscured the scene. It seemed strange since the first level zone was tropical and shouldn't have had any mist. But soon, a huge monster emerged from the darkness. The observers were stunned and couldn't understand whether it was part of the trial or where the inspectors had been looking to let such a thing happen. The chief, watching what was happening on the screen, visibly darkened. The fair-haired colleague cautiously asked if everything was normal since the monster looked more like a mutant than part of the test. He also suggested that perhaps it was time to stop this madness since the chief, as the highest guardian, had the right to do so. Another employee added that the location of participant 104 had already been determined and the inspectors were on their way to him. Therefore, he too believed that the test should be stopped. The chief listened to all the requests and admitted that he apparently had no other choice. At that moment, the girl who hadn't taken her eyes off the broadcast froze at what she saw. The black-haired man, whom no one had believed in, managed to fight off the flying monster. The shadow surrounded the mutant and returned his own bombs to him. A pillar of smoke rose above the forest, and the observers were speechless, unable to describe what they had just witnessed. Previously, the chief had thought it was just an equipment malfunction, but now it was clear. It was impossible even to determine the level of this young man. Although the man couldn't properly evaluate the boy's strength, something unimaginably powerful emanated from him. The girl stared wide-eyed as Jason brought the mutant to the ground, her interest in him growing stronger. A colleague approached the blonde woman and quietly remarked that all these achievements had nothing to do with the test. The impudent employee immediately declared that it was Chun Jin-chul from the Red Horse clan, who would be the first to reach the second level. The tension between the two girls began to rise. Behind them, the black-haired employee asked the chief whether it was worth recalling the people already sent to help participant 104. But the boss said there was no need. It was important for them to analyze the injuries and compile a report. Meanwhile, Jin-chul was making his way through the forest, closely monitoring his pocket radar. Soon, he reached the designated point and, noticing that the fog began to dissipate, realized that everything had already been decided. He hastily got rid of the compass so that no one would notice and rushed forward with all his strength. After completing the ritual, he summoned a commander and black mist began to rise above the forest. The observers sat with their mouths open, not understanding what the young man was doing. When the defeated monster rose from the dead, they were completely bewildered. The flying golem furiously lunged at Jason, but he didn't waste time and demanded obedience. The creature realized the outcome and bowed down. Then, the Lord of Hell stood upon a pile of stones and ordered his new subordinate to move forward. At that time, Jin-chul had already reached the portal, convinced that no one but him could pass first. But a residual image of an unknown figure flashed past him. The young man was completely stunned and couldn't comprehend how his rival had managed to perform such a feat. In the corridor, Lisogu approached the observation room, from which surprised exclamations could be heard. He assumed the audience was astonished by Jin-chul's actions, but upon entering, he saw only the bewildered face of a teenager and felt deep disappointment. A bit earlier, Jason had climbed onto his new stone subordinate and searched for a shortcut together with him. Deciding not to take detours, he ordered to move straight ahead. Then he activated the Breath of the Ghetto King, and half of the forest was scorched by this skill. The monster carried him forward, while the black-haired youth tirelessly used the ability again and again. The observers were stunned. Participant 104 used a strange summoning technique and demonstrated skills no one had ever heard of. At first, people doubted whether it was even possible using aura. But since he managed it, it meant it was real. For the staff, the test turned into a true spectacle, and soon they were ready to start betting on Jason's victory. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed in the hall. Everyone turned and saw Leiso, red with anger. The man was ready to make a serious remark to the head of the Red Horse clan. However, such a scene could turn dangerous, so the bodyguard politely asked the outsider not to approach for his own safety. The scarred man pulled himself together, apologized for his behavior, and explained that he had been overly shaken by the incredible abilities shown on the screen. Hwan Junyun was secretly delighted by what was happening since Lisogu was finally getting what he deserved. Even in his worst nightmares, such an arrogant prophet of the Red Horse could never have imagined such humiliation. The head of the Sol clan, meanwhile, realized that Chuyeon should also soon arrive at the scene. Jin-chul's anger burned brighter and brighter when suddenly a dark figure appeared behind him. He turned around and saw Shin-chun rushing toward him. Gritting his teeth, the young man decided that he had no right to lose even to such a dog. Meanwhile, Jason was already standing before the snow mountain of the second level. He ironically noted the organizers' creativity. If the previous location had greeted him with heat, now he had to climb through icy winds. The Lord of Hell released his stone subordinate from service and activated his wrist bracelet. The artificial intelligence that appeared congratulated participant 104. He was the first to reach the second level. The black-haired youth asked whether he could start the task immediately. Then he was told the rules. All participants would be divided into groups of 5 based on strength, each starting from a different location, and the ultimate goal of the test was to reach the mountain's peak. Jason looked at the icy massif. It was difficult to determine its height, but he was sure the mountain exceeded 5 kilometers. He began to climb the cold cliffs. The task seemed simple, but the black-haired youth felt lazy. Moreover, drones constantly hovered above him, preventing him from using his main trump card. Meanwhile, Jincheol appeared below. Looking at his rival, Jason recalled that low-ranked awakened often made a living as simple porters. The blonde, however, grew increasingly furious, outraged that their starting positions had been different. He decided to stop his opponent at any cost. In the distance, he thought he saw a dark figure and irritably assumed it was that annoying Shinchin again. But the figure on the horizon wasn't her. It was a half-dead old man, barely surviving the cold. Seeing him, Jincheol decided to get rid of this fly first. The old man slapped his face, reminding himself of the family he had lost. With thoughts of them, the cold no longer seemed frightening. But soon he was buried under a snow avalanche. The work of the merciless boy. The blonde muttered to himself that the old man didn't know his limits and wished him eternal rest. In the observation department, signal disruptions began again. The drones and other devices had lost contact. Lee Sogu didn't even flinch. He knew this was only the beginning, and now Jincheol had no right to fail him. The other participants, having learned the goal of the trial, decided it wouldn't be difficult. They believed themselves the strongest. But their optimistic thoughts were interrupted. Jincheol suddenly crashed down from the sky onto one of them. The chubby man didn't even have time to blink before he felt an iron grip crush his head. The cameras no longer recorded what was happening, and the blonde revealed the true face of a monster. The champion's Iraq injection had turned him into a ruthless killer. Confident he could now destroy all his rivals. Shinchin, meanwhile, continued climbing but noticed that her equipment started malfunctioning again. She still didn't understand the cause of what was happening. Jason, however, was relieved to realize that the surrounding devices had stopped working. That meant he could finally act as he pleased. He let go of the rock he was holding, smiled, and summoned the armor of Belark. At that very moment, Shinchan felt a powerful surge of energy from below. Jason soared past her face, flying upward on his wings. The girl couldn't believe that participant 104 possessed flight techniques using aura. She had no idea that it wasn't aura at all. Below, the mutated Jincheol continued slaughtering his opponents. Sitting atop a lifeless body, he suddenly noticed Jason racing toward the summit. Enraged, he decided his rival must have been given an ampule from an ultra-rare series and rushed after him. Meanwhile, in the observation room, Hwan Junyun demanded the immediate termination of the competition. The safety of the participants had always been a priority, and therefore Hwan Junyun insisted on halting the trial. But the chief merely asked everyone to be patient and promised that all malfunctions would be fixed as soon as possible. Lee Sogu simply laughed in response. He said that if those who dream of becoming hunters couldn't survive such a minor incident, how could they ever handle their real duties? His audacity stunned many. The long-haired man turned to the test supervisor, wanting to hear his opinion. The latter hesitated and gave no answer. Junyun, clenching his teeth, suggested that Lee Sogu himself was involved in what was happening, and the scarred man didn't even try to deny it. On the contrary, he said that weaklings should be disqualified immediately. He smirked and added that the rookie from the Solin clan was far too feeble to advance any further. Silence filled the hall. Lee Sogu's words were so provocative that no one knew how to react. But Junyun flared up in anger. Lee Sogu only smirked again and advised the old man to take a break and retire. Meanwhile, Jason had already reached the top of the icy iceberg. Before him appeared a new portal leading to the next level. He was ready to enter the final round. Shinchin was still persistently climbing upward, clutching her staff. The mutated Jincheol was moving along the cliffs like a wild gorilla. And at that moment, the old man made his presence known again. He had managed to escape the snow avalanche. Crying with relief, he felt that surviving alone was already a victory. But the icy cold quickly seeped into his bones, and the old man decided it was better to go back down. Meanwhile, the artificial intelligence announced the rules of the third level. The participants would face a monster raid. By fighting them on the battlefield, they had to earn points. And at least 1,000 were required to pass the stage. Shinchin found herself in a dark cave. She tried to wait until her eyes adjusted to the darkness when suddenly she heard someone calling her name. Behind her stood the mutated Jincheol. He wanted to know if she had seen that flying rival anywhere nearby. Realizing who stood before her, the girl understood that the situation was extremely dangerous. The blonde irritably noted that somehow she had managed to get here before him, and it made him furious. Shinshin tried to brush him off politely and told him to get lost. But Jincheol had no intention of letting her go. More genres are coming soon. Subscribe to unlock them all.